Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephanie Ingram. I am co-chair of this community engagement subcommittee.
I am Councilmember Cabrera and I am Stephanie's co-chair.
That's not true.
No, I actually was given equal responsibilities, but see, she's got a binder. She's far more prepared.
So yeah, anyone who knows me knows I love a binder, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for being in here, for being here in person, and those of you who are online. We'll go ahead and we'll kind of just go quickly around the room to see who's here, and then we'll talk a little bit about the purpose and the outcomes of the Redding Consortium for those of us who don't know. So Dr. Jones, if you wouldn't mind getting us started, and then we'll just go around this way.
Thank you. Joseph Jones, Superintendent, Newcastle County VOTEC.
Ken Brown, Director of Family Engagement, Coombe Academy Charter School.
Teron Williams, Coombe Academy Charter School Restorative Practices Coordinator.
Hi, I'm Liz Richards. I'm not on the committee. I do media work, and I had founded the Delaware Cares Coalition, doing some coalition work in Delaware, and I'm here to just listen and potentially help Elena behind the scenes.
State Board of Education.
Good evening, everyone. Jim Simmons, City of Wilmington.
Maria Cabrera.
I'm Stephanie Ingram. I'm a fourth grade teacher, and I'm the president of the Delaware State Education Association.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Lawson. I serve as superintendent of Brandywine School District.
Good evening, Darrell Green, Superintendent of Red Lake Consolidated School District.
Good evening, Helen Anderson, the chair of the Wilmington Learning Collaborative.
Elena, do you know who's online for us? Want to just call them out one by one? Thank you, I appreciate it.
So Superintendent Jeff Benzer, Latasha Johnson, Tika Hartsock, Ray Rhodes, Ayana Khan, Jen Tompkins, and so sorry if I pronounced her name incorrectly, Neka Jones.
Anika Jones, is she there? Sorry. Right. Did you want to give them time to speak about themselves?
Yes, if you all could just give you a brief name and introduction.
Jeff Menzer, Superintendent of Colonial.
Nanika Jones, Deputy Superintendent of Colonial.
Latasha Johnson, Chief Communications and Marketing Officer, Christina School District.
Tika Hartsock, parent.
Ayana Khan, Founder, President, CEO of the Delaware Black Chamber of Commerce.
Jen Tompkins, Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League.
Afternoon, Ray Rhodes, Director of Community Engagement and the STEM Hub at Eastside Charter School.
That's it for everyone online.
Thank you so very much. All right, so Elena, we're going to look to you again to take us through a little bit of the background of the Redding Consortium, and you should have the agenda in front of you and some of the information that we're going to go over.
It's just a quick reminder for everyone. So this is a hybrid meeting. So when you're speaking, can you just say your name and then just project so that folks online can hear you? Just one day. So for the overview for the Redding Consortium. So the Redding Consortium was founded in 2019 to recommend policies and practices to the Governor General Assembly that'll equity and improve educational outcomes for students in pre-K through grade 12, City of Wilmington and Northern Newcastle County, Delaware. So that's our charge for the Redding Consortium. And so as outlined in Senate Bill 148 and also House Bill 222 and 229, the Redding Consortium is mandated to address redistricting in the City of Wilmington and Newcastle County. So this is kind of an overview of the structure for the Redding Consortium. So there are 28 members on the Redding Consortium and 3 ex officio members who are non-voted. So there are currently 3 subcommittees that are focused on redistricting planning for the Redding Consortium as outlined in the interim plan. So there's the operational impacts, fiscal impacts, and community engagement subcommittee, which you all are serving on today. And we also have staff support that's provided by the Institute for Public Administration at the University of Delaware and also Delaware State University. So currently there are 28 separate governing units. and 16 are located within the city of Wilmington. And of amongst all those governing units, approximately 11,000 Wilmington children are served. So that includes public schools, traditional public schools, tech schools, and then also charter schools as well. So while there's been progress made to support Wilmington students, governance, also known as redistricting, is something that the Redding Consortium is focused on streamlining to create more effective and equitable change. And so this is kind of the context for some of the work that's been doing to focus on governance change in Wilmington and what the path forward is and the consortium's work to address that. So this is a high-level overview of the approved interim plan that was passed with the consortium back in May. And so the key areas of the plan include an 18-month timeline to create the redistricting plan. There's a subcommittee structure, which I just talked about. And those 3 subcommittees are tasked with creating the final redistricting plan. And the Delaware State Code outlines 13 stipulations that the consortium must address in any final redistricting plan. And of that plan, it would focus on 2 or fewer districts serving City of Wilmington students. And the consortium is also tasked with conducting a social drivers of health and education landscape analysis, which the approved state vendor is American Institutes for Research, and they'll be focusing on the social drivers of health and education landscape analysis for the consortium. And so we also, as a part of this, to complement the work, the consortium is also going to be focused on detailed broader policies reforms that are related to revenue, state investment, charter and choice reform. So this is an overview of what the operational impact subcommittee will address. So these are the 4 stipulations that subcommittee is tasked with addressing, and so that they're going to be focusing on these 4 stipulations that are outlined here. We also have the overview of the fiscal impact subcommittee and the 3 stipulations that they would have to address, and then also the community engagement subcommittee, which this body is tasked with addressing. And so we'll be focusing on and reviewing some of this information tonight in our breakout group activity. And so as a part of this work, as outlined in the interim plan, the community engagement committee was also tasked with working with PCA and other educator groups to create an educator advisory panel. The subcommittee will also focus on conducting focus groups with impacted communities and also schedule regular check-ins with the Wilmington Learning Collaborative to support immediate help and assistance with Christina School District. And so this is an overview of the subcommittee leadership membership. And so we have the co-chairs, Stephanie Ingram, who's president of DSEA, and Councilwoman Maria Cabrera, and then the subcommittee members are outlined here as well. And then this is the framework that the subcommittees will be focused on addressing. So be focused on addressing the impact of planning around reassignment of students in the City of Wilmington that are currently in the Christina School District, and then also thinking about optimizing the way 2 or fewer districts may serve City of Wilmington students. So this process will look at kind of a framework for subcommittees planning and research, and thinking about how community engagement can be an integrated part of each of the subcommittees' work. And of course, we had mentioned earlier, broader policy reform efforts that will redistricting. So this is the high-level timeline. So currently, we have the subcommittees meeting for their first few meetings this month and in January and February. AAR, which I mentioned earlier, are conducting the formative report as a part of their landscape analysis, and some of that was included in the information that was emailed to the committee, but they'll be conducting the landscape analysis research, and so they'll have their first formative report. They'll also have a series of subcommittee convenings where all of the redistricting subcommittees will come together to do deeper planning and research regarding redistricting. And then we'll also have full body meetings for the Redding Consortium, and in addition to additional phase reports by AAR for their landscape analysis. This is a kind of an overview here as well of the process that was shared at the last full body meeting as well. With the hope that in December there will be a final redistricting plan that the committee will work. So now we'll open it up for questions.
Can you look at the chat? I think there's someone put something in the chat and I don't know if it pertains to what you were going on. Okay, thanks. We'll take care of that. Does anyone have any questions on the overview of the Redding Consortium work so far and the timeline? Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on. So in order for us to be an effective group, we want to think about establishing subcommittee norms, which I do believe is in your packet in front of you. A sample set of norms and values, and I know it's stapled. It's a lot of information, but I just wanted us to think about what would work for us. It's on the first two pages, pages 1 and 2. Thinking about what will work and if there's something that we're missing. Just take a few minutes to go over there. So anything that you want to add that's not in there, or anything you want to take out, so we can kind of agree that this is how we're going to interact with one another when we come to meetings. As we look at page 1 and 2, is there anything on those pages that you disagree with? That you don't be able to abide by? Or anything that you believe is missing? And we can always, excuse me, we can always circle back and add things as we find them necessary. So I'll just take your silence as kind of a commitment to agree to abide by these general guidelines. Thank you. One of the things that Councilwoman Cabrera and I talked about is having a public comment before we jumped into doing our work, so we could hear if anybody had anything they'd like to add, hear those things before we started our work. Elena, do we have anyone who signed up for public comment online? I don't have anyone online. Karen, is there anything you'd like to say to the group? You're just kind of listening. That's fine. Thank you very much. All right, so at this time, we don't have any public comment, so we'll continue to move on. So for tonight, one of the things that we wanted to do was to take a look at the stipulations that the Community Engagement Subcommittee was going to be tasked to work upon. I have mixed up all my papers, so I'm sure you have the stipulations in front of you. Oh, good. So our subcommittee has 5 stipulations, and I'm not going to read them to you, but what we wanted to do was break out into smaller groups and to think a little bit about, we're going to assign each group stipulations so we can think about what do we need to make sure that we're addressing the stipulations. Is there further data that we need? Do you have questions around the stipulations? Are they clear? Are they concise? What does it look like for our group to address these stipulations that we have? And you see the 5 stipulations on your paper.
There's 3 stipulations. My suggestion is maybe as a group to spend 15 minutes on each one. Just, but there might be one that needs more time than the other, but that's one way to make sure that we could get to all 3 of them. And also seeing that some people are not here in person, we might just switch around the makeup of the groups and combine some of us, and then we have a few more people online. I'll let Stephanie address how the online people are gonna work on that.
So we have, I'm sorry, we have the breakout groups in front of us. I'm not sure if you had them in your notes. Good, so breakout group number 1 is going to address stipulations 2, 3, and 4. Breakout group number 2 is going to address stipulations 1, 3, and 5. Breakout group number 3 is going to address stipulations 1, 2, and 4. Breakout group number 4 is charged with 1, 2, and 5. And then the online group, we're going to put you into a side group and you're going to address stipulations 2, 3, and 4 as well. There is a Google Doc online for folks who are online to add their comments. And if you are sitting with someone who also brought their computer, we can also address our concerns by putting them in the Google Doc. Or we can just do pen and paper and we'll take care of that so we can make sure that anything that you say tonight we capture. Yes.
The papers here don't have it.
Okay. Elena, do you have the group listed?
Yeah, I had to make some changes because some folks were joining us online. So for group 1, there's Councilwoman Maria Cabrera and Lisa Lawson. And then Jim Simmons for Mayor Carney.
Okay.
Breakout 2 is Stephanie Ingram. And then Dr. Bob Andrzejewski, which is not here, so that's, yep. And then Ken Brown. We might have to add to that group.
Okay.
Breakout group 3 is Helen Anderson, Ray Rhodes, Joseph Jones. And breakout group 4 is Terrell Green, Teron Williams, and breakout group 5, which is online, Sika Hartsock, Ayana Khan, Latassa Johnson, Jeff Menzer, Jennifer Tompkins, and Nneka Jones.
Right, Nneka Jones and Ray Rhodes is also online. So yes, so Ray Jones, Avery joined. Good evening. Thank you for coming. So is there a group that has less members?
Yeah, breakout group number 2.
Number 2? Okay.
Yeah, so you have Steph, you have, Kim, is it 2? So we were looking at, there's 2 people in group 3, Helen Anderson and Joseph Jones. Now, I saw that they have 1, 2, and 4. Group 1 has 2, 3, and 4. So maybe that's combine those 2. We'll do 4 stipulations instead of 3.
If you would mind picking someone in your group to kind of do a quick debrief, and then we'll also have the folks online do the same thing. I guess we can just go group by group. Okay, so we'll start with our large breakout group.
Yeah.
Breakout group number 1. It is, yes.
So we addressed stipulation 1 as well as the other 3. Do you want me to read all the bullet points that it's captured in the Google Doc?
No, just your highlights, maybe 3 or 4 highlights.
So we talked a lot about the new student information system that's rolling out across Delaware Infinite Campus and the need to capture historical information in school, which is going away. In terms of data, we talked a lot about collective bargaining agreements. We talked about salary schedules, seniority rosters, working conditions, and how they will meld together or not. We talked about whether there would be layoffs and reductions in force as a result of the process. We talked about gathering some data for natural attrition, projected retirements, resignations, and that would help speak to some of the data around layoffs and RIFs. We talked about the various collective bargaining agreements that exist across school districts, not just teachers. We have paraprofessionals, transportation, custodial maintenance, school nutrition, and secretaries in some districts. We talked about contractual agreements among districts. An example was Kelly substitutes. Some districts are offering different rates than other districts. That would have to be, again, melded, integrated in some way. The procurement process, and then data limitations. We talked about if we don't have e-school access, that's going to be a problem around that historical data. And then just staffing information, vacancies, who's in an LTS, a long-term sub position, who's a para as teacher because of a vacancy. Those kinds of things aren't in one repository. They're being maintained individually by each district.
If I can add to that real quick too is, and then where would it be housed? Because DOE was saying they didn't want to pay for housing it, that who house it, but we want DOE to house it. So that also came up as, something that we need to address.
Just move on to two.
Yes, please.
Stipulation 2, we talked about need to know. We would need to know best ways to engage each of the stakeholder groups. We brainstormed this mainly around community, town halls, online surveys to gain feedback, boots on the ground, door-to-door surveys, on-the-spot iPad surveys. We talked about a DETV segment, student voice opportunities to tell stories. So those are all pieces of data that we could identify and move forward with. We talked about using regular mail, postcards, beginning a MailChimp for Redding, just to start gathering followers and continually adding on to that list. We talked about a major concern we have with our Latino population and the ability to engage them actively based on where we are in our country right now. We talked about specifically Hispanic media, newspaper, radio stations, churches, social media, which could be expounded out to other groups, but talked specifically about that group. We talked about making sure that we're only counting stakeholders once, that if we have a number of town halls and the same people show up at every meeting, that could inflate the number. So we would need some sort of electronic sign-in to make sure we have individuals and we're counting people individually. We kind of phased out, there's phase 1, educating people on the vision, letting them know what's going on with Redding. Phase 2, just hearing from them, in-person surveys, boots on the ground, all those ways to collect that data. Phase 3 being an analysis of the data, what's everyone saying, and then reporting back to Redding as a full body as a phase 4. And then text messaging campaign was another idea we put under additional thoughts and electronic sign-ins into meetings.
Mentioned town halls too.
And town halls, yep.
And all of this strategy can be used for every community. And if there's other groups that have different languages too, we have to just be sensitive about the class.
So for stipulation 3, an assessment of educational needs of the city of Wilmington students. This one was fairly quick for us. We thought that a lot of information has been collected across years, but we need to be brought up to speed on the data that has already been collected and knowing those expansive needs of our children, any updated for 2025 and the resources to support them. But we talked about landscape analysis from WEAC, from WEAC. We talked about additional sources from nonprofits and other organizations that have data regarding children. We have census data, we have kids count data. We're sure that UD has some data, but they were working the WEAC and WEAC committee, so likely they're housing some data. Just talking about organizing it, prioritizing it, and analyzing it in terms of those needs. And then how will we move forward with that, just in terms of combining districts. That this stipulation 3 kind of bleeds into the educator one from above, because based on the needs of children will be then your staffing. And so they will coincide with each other. And then for stipulation 4, in terms of directives for improving secondary education options for the city of Wilmington, we talked a lot about choice in Delaware. We would need to know choice laws and regulations and the current landscape in Newcastle County related to public schools and charter schools and the choice process. We would need to know the patterns of Students going to private school from the city of Wilmington. We talked about recruitment of athletes and offering of scholarships and how choice can sometimes be affected by visual and performing arts, athletics, STEM, there are military options. We talked about whether there will be a consensus that we need to add a high school back into the city. So right now we have 2 high schools, but they are both have selection processes to be enrolled. Howard's a VOTEC, you have to choice and get in. Charter School of Wilmington is the same for Red Clay. So do we want a high school option that is? Oh, yes, and CAB as well. You're absolutely right. But they all 3 have selection processes. And so do we want a high school option that is a feeder school, a feeder high school without a selection process? So in essence, that would be returning to what was before Wilmington High School. Not necessarily there or exactly the same, but the concept. And then specific data needed to make those recommendations. We talked about how many students do Howard and Charter turn away each year that have zip codes for children who are residing in the city of Wilmington, surveying middle school parents and asking whether there's a desire for a city feeder high school without a selection process, or is there strong feelings to go to where they currently feed. We talked about prior siblings and there being a family element in attending the same high school as older brothers and sisters. And so it could very well be that families do not want necessarily a feeder high school in the city. All students need options. We can't make assumptions that students do not want to go to their feeder pattern. They may. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. You didn't leave anything for everyone else. I'm just kidding. You did.
They did a phenomenal job.
Thank you very much for your work. So I would just ask that next, I'll go and try not to repeat anything that you talked about. So we did ask for stipulation number 1 when we're talking about implications for educators and personnel to think about what metrics are being used to measure equity for our students and what best practices are we currently using. When we talked about data-driven initiatives to ensure quality, what are the best practices that are being used now? What can we be doing better? We also then talked about making sure we're meeting with the people who are actually working with the students, making sure we're meeting with the students and their families when we're talking about what services and resources do they need. Not having a one-size-fits-all kind of mindset for resource allocation. We talked about cultural competency and inclusivity. The trainings cannot be voluntary. Everyone needs to be a part of the changes that are happening in the buildings and everyone needs to buy in. But what does that look like? Because you can't force buy-in. So how do we truly make sure that we're changing the cultures and the climate in our schools and what does that look like? We also talked about the idea that we're not quite sure what districts are already doing to create some affinity groups and work around cultural competency. We don't know what everyone's doing. I know what Colonial's doing because that's my home district, but we might need to bring that into the room. We also worked on stipulation number 3 and number 5, and we talked about do we have qualitative data on student outcomes? What does that look like? We have lots of numbers, but do we have other data we could use? And then one question that we asked is how do we ensure that the data collected drive real change? How do we create a sense of urgency and making sure, to your point, driving people out? We did talk about some of those same ways to get the information out to folks, billboards, mailers, radio spots, maybe thinking about partnering with WLC when they're having their meetings. What questions are they asking to try to get us some of that data and really getting the community across the board to understand why it's important to hear about these issues. And I think I can leave it at that for us. Is everyone okay with that? Okay, good. Thank you. We did, but we're not going to really repeat what other people said. We did all 3 of them though. Yeah, we did. We certainly did. We put all our information in the Google Doc as well. Breakout group number 4. That's Dr. Green's group. Do you have a reporter?
Okay. So we had stipulations 1, 2, and 5. So much was of what was already shared. I mean, initial question was, is the stipulation clear? We felt it was clear. just in the sense of what it was asking us to do around looking at engaging with, again, labor representatives to early to identify concerns, and craft solutions for all the things that Dr. Lawson indicated around collective bargaining issues, staffing, vacancies, all of those very technical, operational kinds of aspects in dealing with that stipulation. Again, analyzing collective bargaining, seeing who's unionized, who's represented, who doesn't, because all things aren't equal across all districts. So don't really need to belabor that one. Two, again, asking if the stipulation was clear. We really discussed how are we defining engagement. Engagement means different things to different people, and depending on where we're talking about, albeit understanding that we're saying this is to remove Christina from the city, they still need to be engaged because the work that they are doing will impact whoever the receiving districts are. So how do we look at engagement across all the districts that are serving? And not only that, I think more collectively or more broadly, looking at the fact that, again, we have 16 governing bodies within the city. But we're talking about comprehensive school districts being impacted, but that could also mean students who have decided the choice out. So how are we actually engaging the charters and the broader community to be able to, maybe they want to take their district option, given the changes that are being proposed or recommended. So how do you kind of look at it internal from the district, but then broader, all the strategies that everyone just indicated, using various media mechanisms to be able to do that. I think the other important thing too is you got to give them a vision. Because if this is just a blank town hall, come and share your grievances, we're gonna hear the same things that we historically have heard without giving people a hope for the future. So this has to be aspirational and just in terms of how we're engaging people and what the messaging and the communication around why is this change necessary? Because if folks generally just see you're just redrawing the boundaries or the lines without actually changing the conditions, I think the community will continue to see or feel what they've felt for generations now, right? Disenfranchisement, dissatisfaction, and see this as status quo.
In fact, one of the other things that came out for us on that one is prioritizing, decentralizing communication so that it's not simple. How are community entities apart from Redding being engaged to make sure these communities understand what's happening and getting them to the table? Who else is being invited as a communication partner for the work that's happening here that might not be happening from this group going out?
So what we said with that is using, to your point, Stephanie, the WLC strategy around engagement and outreach, right? Engagement is who we're contacting as a consortium to be able to engage, but outreach is actually going out to the broader community and finding avenues to engage them where they are, right? The local churches, local CBOs, and different things. And we also wanted to make sure, and we put in here that when we talked about the educators, not to overlook the fact that as part of this in the approved initial interim framework is the educator advisory panel. To really work across districts with the educator advisory panel to be the voice of, a lot of the educators and then make sure that information actually goes back across members as a whole. But we did want to make sure that that gets noted because that was a part of the original framework. And then for number 5, again, that was really looking at the process for ongoing monitoring and evaluation of educational impacts and outcomes of implementation, which will include annual report by the consortium to the governor, the General Assembly, Secretary of Education, and the State Board of Education. One, how are we defining success beyond the framework of the Delaware School Success Framework, which is federal accountability? I mean, there are requirements that we have to do, but if that's the sole measure or barometer of school success, then we continue going to throw proficiency rates out there without actually looking at opportunities and access for students. Again, part of what you mentioned was the qualitative. What is the experience that students are having in schools and how are we measuring that to be success beyond proficiency rates? And are we actually using a growth to proficiency model to be able to demonstrate that children are growing despite what people are perceiving of them? And then the only thing for the original group, just also noting that the WLC has a Wilmington High School stipulation actually written into the MOU. So I think that's worth noting and making it a point. While it's not Redding specific, the WLC actually should be also focused on a city high school.
If I could just say, I thought the groups, you guys did a great job brought up some excellent points that we look, just everybody's bringing their level of expertise to this, so. Co-chair found this to be quite an engaging exercise. Thank you for your.
Let's just have the folks who were
Yeah,
online
let's try the
also,
online people.
if there's someone who could report out for, Dr. Mentor, is that you?
Yeah, I'll jump on, and I'm not going to rehash everything that was just said because we pretty much talked around the same topics. We will reiterate Dr. Lawson's point in around the importance of the conversion to Infinite Campus and the impact that's going to have on the ability to look at the data the way that it was beginning to be looked at through the data dashboard, where we had students identified by their residents and we're geotagging the data with Data Service Center for all the districts serving students in the city of Wilmington. Then to Darrell's point, we really looked at some clarity around the stipulations, like what does engagement mean and transitioning to what? Like that dictates a lot of how that conversation or those conversations will go. And then to kind of really jump down to the assessments, that really, we felt the assessment of the students' educational needs, we felt that the data dashboard work that was being done previously, Tika and I were both on the work group for social determinants work group that was involved in that we were getting to a place where we were actually going to have that data. We're now uncertain about where that is and how quickly we'll be able to get back to that space that we were at. And then the last one for the directives for improving secondary education options, we just kind of thought that it's kind of hard to have a directive when you don't know actually what you're doing yet. So we felt like you make a directive maybe after you get to a certain phase, but to like start issuing directives without having data, needs assessments and the like, it's very difficult to make that statement. And then lastly, the use of the term education options kind of has an implication of like, where are you going to go to school? Are you going to go to VOTEC? Are you going to go to charter? Are you going to go to private? The options is is the model that we're currently in. We thought that secondary educational experience for students, as opposed to improving the education options, you're kind of keeping us in silos, it felt like, versus turning it to be student-centered at the secondary level. And that's generally our conversation that was different from none of the what was not brought up previously.
Thank you for that. Does anyone have any last words I'd like to say about something that the group didn't touch on? I think we did a good job. Thank you very much. Like Councilman Cabrera said, thank you for your thoughts and putting them in the room. Thank you for sharing them out and capturing them on the Google Doc. I think one of the last things we need to do is really to consider, and we did as a group, but if you consider individually and you have some more thoughts, what do we need from the ARR group as far as data goes to be able to do what we're doing? Is there anything that we don't have that we need to have in hand as we make further plans, as we think about what it looks like to interact with the community and to get their feedback? Is there data that we're missing? Is there something that we specifically want to ask them for? So kind of keep that in mind as we're moving forward. And then we wanted to talk a little bit about meeting cadence. How often do you believe as a group we need to meet, and what does that look like? Does this time work for people? Does it not? It's not something you need to answer right now, but what does it look like for us to continue meeting monthly, every 2 weeks? How do we think we need to move forward as we're planning for engagement to the community and then actually making those happen? So what are your thoughts around that? Yes.
I don't know that I'm gonna say it's an elephant in the room, but I don't know that that's the proper segue. We talk about the inclusion of the governor, the secretary of ed. I don't think we've been mindful enough that those are two new people. And we don't know where they sit with one of them. We don't know where they sit with it. The other one, we don't know if they even know anything about this. So who is having that conversation?
I do believe, I don't mean to interrupt you. I thought I saw Secretary of Education Martin on as one of the people who was on the Zoom for a brief second, but you're right. We do need to talk to them.
Be able to to be able to field the questions that she may have. Because her level of questioning is gonna be different from those folks who've been here since the
got
beginning or on.
to catch up for sure.
So I think that that's important that we mention that as well, so.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Stephanie, just want to mention, Senator Lockwood will be having those conversations with the members of the cabinet who have just been confirmed, but I know that they're new, so I just wanted to let you know that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thing I would say is let's walk again. Because these are all state governmental initiatives, and that's how the community receives it. So being intentional about what's Redding's lane versus, again, and making sure that all of us, because we all sit in multiple rooms around this in terms of that engagement strategy, and really maybe coalescing a little clearer around how that broader outreach and engagement actually looks like, so we're not tripping over each other. And not, again, because I think there is engagement fatigue. To keep tapping the same individuals to get the same community voice over and over again. And I know the PAR work, participatory action research, is a part of this. But how do those authentic voices get captured as a part of this subcommittee work? So that we're not being duplicative in terms of our efforts, and then having the community feel like we've been here before, and yet how is this different?
Yes.
I was also thinking about student representation.
Mhm.
I feel like that is a voice that's not here at the table. And I don't know, maybe we could speak to some of the SGA, like student government associations within our schools, to see how we could formulate some form of council. Because I mean, if you're trying to develop a student council, I think we already have that there by our schools having their own student government associations, and then have them come and have them be a part of this conversation. Because just to your point, the fatigue can be tired, but young people have faster legs than us. They are quicker to communicate. They could share a point and faster than us, right? Where we think about all of the little nuances when they can just move and create some some progress around a particular topic. So I do think we need to invite students to have student voice, because they are like, that's who we represent.
And there are community efforts where they're already engaged in that work, and I think that's the point. Right? We got to figure out who they are, right, and how to engage them, and maybe not even bring them to this table. We go and sit at their table.
Yeah.
Right?
Amen.
Ask for opportunities to get invited to their table.
So in terms of next steps,
I'm sorry, just one last thought too. We have a lot of relative caregivers raising children in the city of Wilmington. And so how do we engage grandma, great grandma who's raising great and grandchildren? Like there are a whole host of relative caregivers and grandparents, right? And so that's a very different conversation. And how do we cater and be intentional about, that constituency group and how we engage them? I'm sure their perspective on what's needed in schools is completely different than that single mom or that other parent who might be working. Because I know we deal with that a lot currently, just relative caregivers who, and I want to say it might have been the Hope Commission report, which was a while ago, that kind of highlighted the percentage. And I want to say maybe at that point it was roughly around a third student population in the city being raised by grandparents.
and to that point, then how do we engage them when they may not be on the traditional resources that we use? They may not be texting and emailing, and they're not online, and they're not doing all of that. So, they still have a house phone, a house line. So how do we actually do that community outreach with them to be able to hear their voices? Because
I
it's
just laughed because my parents have a house line, and if childhood friends can't get in touch with me, they still know to call the house.
Yes, exactly. My friends still know that phone number. Yeah.
Same question when I was in elementary
Can you
school.
talk a little bit to Maria's point about some boots on the ground going out with literally iPads and talking, just knocking on.
We talked about door knocking.
So it's just some organic approaches. Because to your point, Drew, they may not even be aware of some of these other media strategies that we would use.
Or we even, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that those are wonderful, but one of the things that we talked about was there are already entities that the community is engaged in. And it's important to not, if a stranger knocks on my door with an iPad and says, I want to talk to you about X, they're perceived differently than if my pastor or my mom or the community center that I'm at all the time. And the point that we were making is there has to be an effort, if we're really talking about engaging community, to invite some of the people who are actually with them more than school administrators may be with them, to be part of the conversation so they can begin to drive some of the information you want the broader community to understand. There's a trust factor that they may have in the conversation that people who sit around these tables all the time don't have when you bring it. So I'm thinking about who is not here, who helped the conversation get pushed to where you ultimately want it to be if they were here.
And that's the part conversation, right? Like in the group who's doing out the action research, actually going out, who are boots on the ground, who are already in the community, are we really leveraging that to be part of that voice to get that authentic feedback? Because we know, when we were discussing, we have households that may have children in 3 different systems within that same household, right? They have a child at Kahumba in elementary, they have a high school student at Howard, and someone at CAD. You know, so, and they're navigating 3 different districts, 3 different systems within one household. So really having someone from that community, again, I would just say through the participatory action research, because it's action oriented. You're getting that immediate feedback and we can actually do some things to really engage and not have it be, again, perceived to be governmental. Because they deal with a
We
lot of
talked about the
different.
churches being very key as a way, you know, a place where people trust. Because you have the trust and then you engage the pastors. So in turn, they can help us engage the participants, the parents, the grandmoms and grandpops that may be still going to church and where we may not reach them in another circle, we can reach them there. Community centers, we talked about town halls, but definitely the trusted sources, resources they have.
Darrell said that he had, you know, that there are parents who say, I can't come to one more school thing, so I've checked out. But if they're going somewhere, I said, wow, it's amazing you have them saying that there, because I hear it in church. But then maybe they're going to a fraternity meeting or a sorority meeting, or lodge meeting. The broader the table, the more opportunities you have to engage them in a place where they are. And I know that takes work, and I don't know how it exactly happens, but I think the same people around the same tables trying to get at people on social media or inviting them to town halls might not be the most effective way to get it done.
And I think the visioning message is critical though. So you gotta give people something, give input for hope for something better. Because if it's just to come to tell me more about what's wrong, deflating to a lot of people, and a lot of people are more apprehensive. And I know like in Brandywine, they have the elementary basketball league. Gyms are crowded.
Right.
And that's a low effort in the sense that people are just coming because it's not you giving me something that I, in essence, that I'm there. So we gotta figure out kind of low effort types of things and gatherings that just bring people together and share the message and get feedback, rather than thinking that we're gonna orchestrate something to get people to come in, because we could fill a room and allow people to air their grievances, but how productive?
Sharing the vision is important.
One of my best programs was actually a grandparent day that I had. I just had tea and donuts and let them come in and talk to us about what was going on and how do we get to their families. And it's really, my whole cafeteria was filled with grandparents.
I was thinking, I mean, I did not actually share that, because we talked about this at WLC, like barbershop talks, hair salons, those places that very natural. And then, you know, I think making sure that the message is in certain places, right? Like our corner stores that are really big, because the one over east side, he always lets me post everything I need to post out to families. But I think being very intentional about where you put this information. Unfortunately, for a lot of our families, it might have to be the liquor store. Might not be the place we want to advertise, but that's what we
Plenty
might
of
need to
parent
put
teacher
it.
conferences.
And all the hair stores, I mean,
Right in the
we
booth.
have to be very open. To me, it's just a matter of putting it out there, and at least if we can grab their attention, we can get it, but I think, you know, there are natural places that we can absolutely tap into, but I just think we just have to start tapping. And we have to stop just, you know, saying, these are the problems, no, we're looking for solutions and we need your input for the solution piece of it. I think we have to stop making these like broad statements about what we feel like needs to happen and hear from the community about what needs to happen, but we're asking for solutions and we don't have them. We don't have them all.
Judgment on that.
That's how we have to say it.
Right. Meeting people where they are and asking for their assistance. Yeah.
Would they help grow? They support this and they feel like they're part of the process. That's even better.
Right, we talked about having folks community-wide, and I'm talking about everybody, no matter who's affected, understand that we don't want to do it to them. We want to make sure they're with that part of the process. So.
To that point, then I would suggest, because it came out twice, if you look at the second stipulation, just the way it's worded, engagement of educators, staff, parents. We already talked about relative caregivers.
Right.
Who might look at that and say, well, then I'm not covered.
No.
And then we
yeah.
talked about students who are the end user of the product, who aren't captured in that wording either. So just the way things are worded and say, I'm either invited or disinvited
Okay.
from being at the table.
But I think it's the way we communicate it,
Yeah.
because unfortunately the wording is in code.
Oh, say less.
Yeah, so that's the way. Well, it's written, I mean, it's stipulate, the stipulation is actually written out.
Okay.
in Title
You can't
14.
change it,
So we
yeah.
can't change the wording per
Yeah,
se, but the
right.
way we message and communicate it.
Right, the way we're advertising it, we can certainly make sure it's more inclusive. Yeah. I'm looking at the time and Elena, we're not setting a next meeting date here. We're doing like a doodle poll, right? Okay.
Send that out, but I just wanted to.
No, go. Yes, you want.
Sure, I think Karen was just.
Karen, anything you want to add?
Sure, I added some notes to the last part of the document. I tried to look at each of the groups to see if there were some things not captured on them. Some of the things I highlighted was to make sure we keep in mind that some schools do have special programs housed within them. That we need to gather data around those programs and which schools they're housed in, for example, our DAP and REACH programs. How we'll be ensure engagement and feedback from our educators, administrators, families, and students from programs servicing and supporting our students with disabilities. What barriers do they foresee, concerns they may have. I also wrote down about making sure we're gathering data on our contracted staff members, what organization and companies are providing staffing aside from Kelly Services, and the overall impact of that. I also, for stipulation number 2, I wrote down some notes about it's important we don't lose the voices of our unhoused families, ensuring there are accessible opportunities to provide feedback, to capture their voices, whether that's going directly out to the local motels, the shelters, where families are residing and speaking to families directly, providing transportation for our families that are unhoused to these scheduled opportunities to provide feedback and events that may happen throughout the community, that are planned for parent feedback and engagement. It'd be important to conduct a landscape analysis in this space and gather data across the districts, but also speak to schools directly, as each school has their own unique set of needs around servicing our unhoused families and students. What barriers are they facing? What barriers do they foresee coming up? And how can we address them in advance for families? The need for, I just wanted to add up here about the need for translators, not to forget our Muslim communities and other ways to engage families in this process, and also how we're gonna gather data and moving forward to ensure the documents we're putting out are also translated for families as well, so those are accessible in what's happening along this process. How are we engaging our families and students that are in alternative placements to ensure their voices are captured as well? I also, just one more thought, just combining collaborative efforts between school districts to address the supports and barriers of our unhoused students and families, gathering and collecting data on the population of students that are unhoused and also unaccompanied youth in our schools that will be impacted. And really doing a thorough analysis, this is under stipulation number 3, doing a thorough analysis outlining those potential impacts and barriers that may come up for our families during the process.
Thank you, and thank you for adding that to the Google Doc. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. So next steps you can see on the screen. Again, you know, the Google Doc is active and it's live, so you can continue to add thoughts as they come to you. We'll be working to schedule our next subcommittee meeting, but we also are going to be talking, and Elena can speak more to this, about the consortium subcommittee retreat that you should have gotten an invite for, March 15th. Yep, so you'll be receiving the invite for the retreat so that the subcommittees can come together and to continue to work on the stipulations as we're moving forward. And then you can see AIR is going to give us an update on their landscape analysis at the retreat as well. I think that's all that I have to say. Does anyone have any questions or concerns before we adjourn? Councilwoman Cabrera, did you want to?
I really appreciate